There's a courtroom you've never seen. No judge in a robe. No jury in a box. Just a throne too bright to look at and a question that echoes through eternity. And one day, in that courtroom, your name could be spoken. Not by a friend, not by an angel, by something older. Something that has been watching you, counting your prayers, measuring your devotion, waiting for you to break. That's what happened to Job. One morning, he was the richest man in the East, surrounded by children, drowning in blessing. By sunset, he was sitting in ashes, scraping his own skin with broken pottery, wondering if God had forgotten his address. He didn't know he was being tested. He didn't know there was a bet. He just knew that the life he trusted had collapsed in 15 minutes, and that God he served had gone silent. If God is good, why does it hurt this much? You've asked that question. Maybe not out loud. Maybe just at 3 a.m. when no one else could hear. Job asked it too. And the accuser who questioned his faith is still in that courtroom. Still watching. Still waiting to see if your worship is real or just a transaction. Before the sun rises over the land of Uz, one man is already awake. Smoke curls from the altar in his courtyard, the same altar that burns every single morning. Job kneels in the dust, whispering prayers for children who are still asleep in their beds. He prays for sins they might have committed in their dreams. That's the kind of man Job was. Not just faithful, relentlessly faithful. A man who left nothing to chance with God, and God had rewarded every ounce of it. Flocks so vast, they stretched to the horizon. Caravans of camels that took half a day to pass through the valley. A house loud with 10 children laughing around a table, wine flowing, no empty chairs. When Job walked through the city gates, elders rose to their feet. Young men stepped back in silence. Widows blessed his name because his generosity had fed them through winter. This was a man wrapped in blessing like a garment, warm, safe, untouchable. But walls don't show you what happens inside a house. His children had their own rhythm. Every week, the oldest son would host a feast. The 10 of them rotating houses, filling rooms with music and roasted lamb, and the kind of reckless laughter that only comes from people who then never buried anyone they love. Job was never invited. He didn't need to be. But every single time they gathered, he felt it a tightness in his chest, a whisper he couldn't name. What if one of them says something foolish? What if one of them forgets God in the middle of the wine? So the morning after every feast, before his children even woke with their headaches, Job was already at the altar, offering blood for sins that may not exist. That's not just faith. That's fear wearing the mask of devotion. But right now, while Job kneels watching the smoke rise toward heaven, that smoke is drifting through a courtroom he doesn't know exists. And in that courtroom, his name has just been spoken out loud, not by a friend, not by an angel, by something far older and far hungrier. There is a place beyond the sky, not the soft blue that Job sees when he lifts his eyes from the altar. Something older, a throne room where light doesn't behave like light, where it bends, thickens, carries weight. The angels gather here, not the chubby babies from paintings. These are beings of fire and function, arranged in ranks that human language fails to name. And today, among them, someone else has come. He doesn't belong, but he's allowed. That's the part that twists the stomach. Satan walks into the presence of God, not sneaking, not crawling through a back door. He strolls in like a lawyer arriving at court, because that's exactly what he is. The name Satan doesn't mean monster. It means accuser, prosecutor, the one whose job is to find fault. And right now, standing before the throne of the Almighty, he waits, not to worship, to report. God speaks first. That detail matters more than most people realize. Where have you come from? The question isn't ignorance. It's invitation, a door held open for the accuser to step through. Satan answers without flinching. From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. He's been walking among Job's flocks, watching Job's children laugh, counting Job's prayers, taking notes. Then God does something strange. Unprompted, unforced, he points downward. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. Blameless, upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. It sounds like pride. It sounds like a father showing off his son. But listen closer. God is placing Job on a scale, and Satan has just been handed the weights. The accuser smiles. Does Job fear God for nothing? 4 words that reframe everything. Satan presses further. You've built a hedge around him. You've blessed his work. You've made him untouchable. Of course, he worships you. You're his good luck charm. The accusation beneath the accusation. Job's faith is just a transaction. Remove the prophet and watch the loyalty evaporate. God doesn't argue, doesn't defend. He simply opens his hand. Very well. Everything he has is in your power. But do not lay a finger on the man himself. The deal is struck. The courtroom adjourns. And somewhere far below, Job finishes his morning prayer, rises from his knees, and walks toward breakfast, completely unaware that his entire life just became an experiment. It was an ordinary morning. That's the cruelest part. The sun rose the same way it always did. The servants went out to the fields. The animals grazed. Job probably sat in the shade, watching the heat shimmer off the hills, thinking about the evening meal. The kind of thoughts you have when you believe tomorrow is guaranteed. Then a man appeared on the horizon, running, not the steady jog of someone bringing routine news. This was the sprint of terror arms pumping, robe flying, voice already screaming before his words became clear. He collapsed at Job's feet, gasping. The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby when the Sabaeans attacked. They took everything. They put the servants to the sword, he swallowed. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. Job's mind was still processing the first disaster when a second runner burst through. His face was burned. His clothes smelled of smoke. Fire fell from the sky, he said, barely able to stand. It burned up the sheep. It burned the servants alive. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. Before the second man finished, a third appeared, then a fourth. The Chaldeans took the camel's 3 raiding parties, perfectly coordinated, sweeping in like wolves. And then the 4th messenger. This one didn't run. He staggered. His eyes were hollow. Your sons and daughters were eating at their oldest brother's house. A wind came from the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. He paused. The silence was heavier than any scream. It collapsed on them. They are all dead. 10 children, gone. Not to sickness, not to old age. To a wind that came from nowhere and targeted one house. 4 messengers, 4 catastrophes, each one interrupting the last. No time to grieve before the next blow lands. This isn't tragedy. This is demolition. Systematic, precise, as if someone was checking items off a list. What do you do when the world collapses in 15 minutes? Most people scream. Most people run. Most people look for someone to blame, a servant who wasn't watching, a guard who fell asleep, a God who looked away. But Job doesn't do any of that. He stands up, slowly, like a man whose bones have suddenly forgotten their purpose. And then he tears his robe. A sound of fabric ripping cuts through the silence. In that culture, it meant something. It wasn't just grief, it was a declaration. I am destroyed. I am entering the land of the dead while still breathing. Job takes a blade to his own head. The hair falls in clumps around his feet. This is a man dismantling himself piece by piece, stripping away every external marker of identity. Wealth gone, children gone, now the robe, now the hair. What's left when you remove everything a man has built? And then Job does the thing that doesn't make sense. He falls to the ground, not in despair, in worship. His face hits the dirt, and the words come out, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." No accusation, no demand for explanation, just surrender. The text says something remarkable next. 4 words that most people skip. In all this, Job did not sin. He didn't curse God. He didn't blame God. He didn't even ask why. Job didn't understand yet. He had no idea about the courtroom. No idea about the accuser. No idea that his faith was being weighed on a cosmic scale. He worshipped in total darkness. And that's precisely what made it real. The courtroom reconvenes. Same throne, same blinding weight of glory. Same angels arranged in ranks beyond human naming. And once again, the accuser walks in. He lost the first round. Job didn't curse God. Job fell on his face and worshipped. By every measure, Satan's hypothesis failed. But prosecutors don't quit after one verdict. They appeal. God speaks first again. "Where have you come from?" Same question, same answer. From roaming throughout the earth. Going back and forth on it. But this time, there's something underneath the words. Satan has been watching Job scrape the ashes of his life into piles. He's been listening to the silence where 10 children's voices used to be. He's been counting the nights Job hasn't slept. God presses. "Have you considered my servant Job? He still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." That last phrase lands heavy. Without any reason. God admits it openly. Job didn't deserve this. There was no hidden sin, no secret rebellion, no cosmic debt being collected. Job was destroyed for a test, and he passed. But Satan isn't finished. "Skin for skin," the accuser replies. His voice is calm, almost bored. It's an old trader's phrase. You give skin to protect skin. You sacrifice one thing to save another. Satan is saying Job only worshipped because his own body was still intact. A man will give everything he has to save his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will curse you to your face. The argument shifts from what Job has to what Job is. God opens his hand again. "Very well, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." The experiment enters phase 2. Satan doesn't waste time. The moment he leaves the courtroom, the attack begins not from the outside this time, but from within. Job wakes up and something is wrong. His skin itches. By midday, the itch becomes a burn. By evening, the burn becomes a scream. Boils erupt across his body. Not a few, not a rash. From the sole of his feet to the crown of his skull, every inch of Job's flesh rebels against him. These weren't ordinary sores. The Hebrew word describes something volcanic raised, inflamed, cracking open, oozing. Job couldn't sit without pain. Couldn't lie down without pain. Couldn't let fabric touch his skin without wanting to tear it off. His own body had become enemy territory. The man who once commanded servants and negotiated with kings now couldn't control whether his wounds would weep or bleed. He leaves his house, not by choice, by shame. Job walks to the edge of the city, to the place where they dump the ashes. The garbage heap. The place for broken pottery and dead animals and everything else the city wants to forget. That's where Job sits. He picks up a shard of broken clay and begins to scrape his own skin, dragging the edge across the sores, trying to find relief that doesn't come. The greatest man in the East, sitting in trash, using garbage to scratch wounds he can't heal. The man who once made elders stand, now makes strangers look away. Job is unrecognizable. And somewhere beyond the sky, in a courtroom Job still doesn't know exists, the accuser watches, waiting for the curse that still hasn't come. Everyone remembers what Job's wife said. Almost no one remembers what she lost. 10 children. The same 10 children Job wept for. She carried them. She nursed them. She watched them grow. watched them leave her house one by one to start their own lives. And then, in a single afternoon, a wind came from the desert and buried all of them under rubble. She is not a footnote. She is a mother standing in a graveyard that used to be a dining room. When she finds Job at the ash heap, she barely recognizes him. This is not the man who built their life. This is a creature covered in sores, scraping himself with broken pottery, sitting in the place where the city throws its rot. She has lost her children, her wealth, her standing in the community. And now she is losing her husband, not to death, but to something slower. She opens her mouth and says the most condemned sentence in the Bible. Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. Pastors have called her a villain for 4,000 years. But listen to what she's really saying. She's watching the man she loves suffer without end, and she wants it to stop. This isn't betrayal. This is a woman who has run out of theology. She believed what Job believed righteousness brings blessing. And now she's standing in the ashes of that equation, watching it burn. Job's answer is firm, but not cruel. You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? He doesn't condemn her. He doesn't divorce her. He doesn't even raise his voice. He just holds the line. And the text says something that cuts both ways. In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. With his lips. The writer wants you to notice what that leaves out. News travels. Within days, 3 men hear what happened to Job and leave their homes to find him. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shahite, Zophar the Naamathite. These aren't strangers. They're old friends, men who've known Job for decades. Men who've debated theology with him over wine and watched him become the greatest man in the East. They make the journey together, planning to mourn with him and comfort him. But when they arrive, they can't find him. They scan the crowd, looking for the man they knew, the one with the rich robes and the commanding presence. Then someone points toward the ash heap, and they see him. A figure hunched in the garbage, covered in sores, scraping himself with broken pottery. They don't recognize him. The text says it clearly. They looked, and they did not know him. The transformation is total. The man they came to comfort has become something else entirely. They do what their culture demands. They tear their robes. They throw dust into the air, letting it fall on their heads. And then they do something that most people miss, something that will become the most compassionate act in the entire book. They sit down on the ground with him, not near him, with him in the ashes, in the filth. And for 7 days and 7 nights, no one says a word. 7 days of silence, no sermons, no explanations, no attempts to fix anything, just presence. 4 men sitting in garbage, breathing the same air, saying nothing. This is what grief looks like when words haven't ruined it yet. This is friendship before theology gets involved. And for 168 hours, it holds. But silence has a shelf life. And when Job finally opens his mouth, everything changes. 7 days of silence. And then Job opens his mouth, not to pray, not to question, but to curse. Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. This isn't doubt. This is a man wishing he had never existed, wishing the door to his life had never opened, wishing the universe had skipped over him entirely. Job doesn't curse God. He curses something older, his own beginning. Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? He imagines a world where he was stillborn, where he went straight from the womb to the grave. In that world, he says, he would be at rest. He would be lying with kings and counselors. He would be asleep. The pain would never have found him because he would never have been awake to feel it. This is chapter 3 of Job. It's the darkest chapter in the Bible, darker than the crucifixion narratives, because those at least have a purpose. Job has nothing, no explanation, no promise, no voice from heaven telling him it will be worth it. He is sitting in ashes, covered in sores, childless, and now he's saying out loud what most people only whisper in the middle of the night. I wish I was never born. The friends listen. For 7 days they said nothing because his grief was too great for words. But this is too much. Job isn't just mourning, he's unraveling. And these men have spent their whole lives believing that suffering has a reason. They cannot sit in the ashes and let this stand. Someone has to explain why this is happening. Someone has to defend God. And so the silence ends and the arguments begin. Eliphaz speaks first. He's the oldest, the most respected. His voice is gentle at the beginning, almost apologetic. If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? He sounds like a friend. But listen to what comes next. Consider now, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? There it is, the knife wrapped in velvet. Eliphaz isn't asking a question. He's making an accusation. Innocent people don't suffer like this. You must have done something. Bildad comes next, less gentle, more direct. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? If your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. Your children, the ones buried under the rubble. Bildad is saying they deserved it, that the wind that killed them was a verdict, not a tragedy. He's explaining Job's dead children as a line item in a cosmic ledger. Zophar doesn't bother with diplomacy. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. You're getting off easy. Whatever you did, the punishment should be worse. Stop pretending you're innocent. Stop claiming you don't know why this is happening. Confess, repent, and maybe God will show you mercy. This is what passes for comfort. 3 friends, 3 speeches, and every single one lands on the same conclusion. This is your fault. The theology is clean. The logic is airtight. Righteousness brings blessing. Suffering means sighing. Job is suffering. Therefore, Job sinned. They can't see any other possibility, because admitting one would mean the universe doesn't work the way they've always believed. And that's a door none of them are willing to open. Job doesn't accept it. He pushes back hard. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall windy words have an end? He calls their theology what it is, empty air. They came to comfort him, and instead they're prosecuting him. They're explaining his suffering with formulas that don't fit. And Job refuses to lie just to make them feel better. But Job's real argument isn't with his friends. It's with God. I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. This is the center of the book. Not the suffering, not the friends, the silence. Job can handle pain. He's proven that. What he cannot handle is the absence of explanation. The feeling that God has stepped back, folded his arms, and is watching without a word. Job demands a trial. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. He wants to stand before God as a defendant. He wants charges read. He wants to cross-examine the Almighty, because anything, even condemnation, would be better than this silence. At least a verdict would mean God was paying attention. 35 chapters of arguments, back and forth. Job defending his innocence. The friends defending God's justice. And underneath it all, the same question echoing in the ashes. Why? Why do the righteous suffer? Why does evil prosper? Why does God not answer when his servant screams? Job doesn't know he's part of an experiment. He doesn't know there's a courtroom. He only knows that the God he served his whole life has gone silent, and the silence is louder than any storm. Then God shows up, not in the way anyone expected, not in a still small voice, not in a gentle whisper. The sky splits open, the wind rises, and out of the storm, the actual physical storm, God speaks. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? The voice shakes the earth. It presses down on Job, like gravity doubling. This is not a friendly conversation. This is a confrontation. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Job wanted a trial. He got one. But the roles are reversed. Job isn't the defendant presenting his case. He's the witness being cross-examined. And the prosecutor is the creator of the universe. God doesn't explain the courtroom, doesn't mention Satan, doesn't give Job the backstory that would make everything make sense. Instead, he asks questions, dozens of them. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely, you know, the sarcasm is intentional. It's not cruelty, it's perspective. God is reminding Job of the scale of things, of the distance between creature and creator. The questions keep coming. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Stars, oceans, the storehouses of snow, the wild ox, the warhorse, the eagle. God takes Job on a tour of a universe he barely knew existed. And every stop on the tour is something Job cannot control, cannot understand, cannot explain. The message is clear. You are small. And that's not an insult. That's a fact. God doesn't stop. He builds. Layer after layer of creation, laid out before Job like evidence in a courtroom. Do you give the horse its strength, or clothe its neck with a flowing mane? Do you make him leap like a locust, striking terror with his proud swording? The war horse that charges into battle without flinching, did Job design that? Did Job code that kind of fearlessness into muscle and bone? Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom and spread its wings toward the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? These aren't rhetorical flourishes. They're exhibits. God is showing Job how little he understands about things he sees every day. If Job can't explain the migration patterns of birds, how can he explain the justice of the Almighty? If he doesn't understand how a horse becomes brave, how can he understand why a righteous man suffers? Then God reaches for the biggest exhibits. Behemoth, a creature of raw power bones like bronze, limbs like iron, the first of the works of God. And Leviathan, the sea monster that makes the ocean boil, that laughs at spears, that has no equal on earth. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook? Can you tie down its tongue with a rope? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? The questions pile up like stones. Job has no answers. This is the climax of the book, and it contains no explanation. God never tells Job about Satan, never mentions the bet, never says, here's why I let this happen. He simply says, I am God, you are not. There are things moving in this universe that you cannot see, cannot name, cannot control, and your job is not to understand. Your job is to trust. It's not the answer Job asked for, but it's the answer Job needed. Job has nothing to say. For 35 chapters he argued, demanded, accused. Now he stands in the whirlwind, and his mouth is shut. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer twice, but I will say no more. The man who wanted a trial has been cross-examined into silence, but something has shifted. This isn't defeat, it's recognition. Job finally sees the distance between what he knew and what he thought he knew. I had heard of you with the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. All those years of sacrifice, all those mornings at the altar, all that careful righteousness Job thought he understood God. He didn't. He understood a system. He understood a formula. He understood a version of God small enough to fit inside his theology. The real God doesn't fit. The real God holds Leviathan on a leash and tells the sea where to stop. The real God builds foundations that human minds cut and measure, and sets stars in motion that human calendars caught and track. The real God is not safe, not predictable, not obligated to explain himself to anyone. And standing in the presence of that God, Job finally understands what faith actually means. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. This isn't self-hatred. The Hebrew word is closer to melt or dissolve. Job's old self, the one who thought he had God figured out, is evaporating. What's left is something smaller, but strangely more solid. Not a man who understands God, a man who has met him, and it turns out that's enough. God turns to the friends. After everything, after the boils, the ashes, the whirlwind, God's anger isn't aimed at Job. It's aimed at Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. Let that land. The friends spent 30 chapters defending God. Job spent 30 chapters accusing him. And God says Job was the one telling the truth. The friends had clean theology. They had airtight logic. Righteousness brings blessing. Suffering means sign. It made perfect sense, and it was completely wrong. They turned God into a vending machine. Insert obedience, receive prosperity. Insert sin, receive punishment. It's a system. And God is not a system. He's a person. A wild, untamable, uncontrollable person who does things for reasons that don't fit on a spreadsheet. God gives the friends instructions. Take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. The irony is surgical. The friends told Job to repent. Now they're the ones bringing sacrifices. The man they accused of hidden sin is now their only intercessor. And Job prays for them. After everything they said, after they blamed his children's deaths on their own sin, after they told him to confess crimes he didn't commit, Job lifts his scab-covered hands and prays for the men who made his suffering worse. This is what restoration looks like. Not revenge, not vindication, but mercy extended to people who don't deserve it. Job forgives them before God ever restores him. After Job prays for his friends, God restores his fortunes. The numbers are deliberate. 14,000 sheep double the original 7,000. 6,000 camels double the 3,000. 1,000 yoke of oxen. 1,000 donkeys. Everything multiplied by 2. The math screams intention. God isn't just giving back. He's making a point. Brothers and sisters who had abandoned Job during his suffering now show up at his door. They eat with him. They comfort him. They bring gifts of silver and gold. The community that looked away while he scraped himself with pottery suddenly remembers he exists. That's how restoration works sometimes. The people who vanished in the darkness reappear when the sun comes out. Job has 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. The daughters are named Shemima, Keziah, Karen, Hapach. Beautiful names. The text says there were no women in all the land as beautiful as Job's daughters. And Job gives them an inheritance alongside their brothers, a radical act in a culture where women owned nothing. This is a man rebuilding, not replacing. You can't replace 10 dead children with 10 new ones, but rebuilding, choosing life again when death had every right to win. But here's what the Sunday school version leaves out. The first 10 children are still dead. Their graves are still in the ground. Their empty chairs are still carved into Job's memory. He lives another 140 years. He sees 4 generations of grandchildren. He dies old and full of days. But somewhere in those 140 years, on a quiet evening, Job remembers. The laughter that used to fill the house. The wind that came from the desert. And he carries that weight to his grave. Restoration doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to breathe again while the scars still ache. Job dies without knowing. That's the part that haunts me. He never finds out about the courtroom. Never learns that Satan walked into the presence of God and called his faith a transaction. Never hears that God pointed at him and said, "Have you considered my servant?" He goes to his grave believing that his suffering was a mystery, and it stays a mystery. God never explains. We know more than Job knew. We've read chapters 1 and 2. We've seen behind the curtain. And somehow, that makes it harder, not easier. Because if Job was a test, what does that make us? If God allows suffering to prove a point to the accuser, what happens when the accuser looks at your life? What happens when your name gets spoken in that courtroom? The answer the book gives is uncomfortable. It doesn't say suffering will make sense. It doesn't promise explanations. It says God is God and you are not, and sometimes that's all you're going to get. Trust isn't the reward for understanding. Trust is what you do when understanding fails. It's worshiping in the ashes before the storm clears. It's falling on your face when every formula has broken. Job's faith wasn't transactional. Satan was wrong. The accuser bet that pain would break devotion, and he lost. But Job's faith also wasn't blind. He screamed. He questioned. He demanded answers he never received. And in the end, he didn't get an explanation. He got a presence. He met God in the whirlwind. And that meeting didn't answer his questions. It made them stop mattering. Sometimes that's what faith looks like. Not certainty, not silence, just presence in the middle of the storm. Job never found out. He lived another 140 years and died without ever learning why. No one told him about the courtroom. No one explained the bet. He went to his grave trusting a God who never gave him the answer he begged for. But he got something else. He met God in the whirlwind, not a theology, not a system. The actual, living, terrifying presence that holds Leviathan on a leash and tells the sea where to stop. And when Job stood in that presence, his questions didn't get answered. They stopped mattering. Will you still trust? If this Christ-centered channel resonates with something inside you, subscribe. We'll meet you in the next storm.